On July 15, 2016, 32-year-old Michael Weber set out on what was supposed to be a 3-day solo hike in Redwood National Park. He parked his blue Honda Civic at the Tall Trees trailhead, logged his journey with park rangers, and disappeared into the dense forest. The experienced hiker never returned to his vehicle. Search teams combed the area for weeks. They found his backpack with the water bladder still half full, his trail mix unopened. A single hiking boot with the laces removed. And then nothing? The search was called off after 18 days. 6 years and 4 months later, on November 23, 2022, a park maintenance worker found a man sitting at the same trailhead parking lot, wearing clothes that hung from his emaciated frame. The man had no shoes. His feet were wrapped in what appeared to be strips of fabric. His skin was unnaturally pale, almost translucent, showing a network of blue veins. The worker approached and asked if he needed help. The man looked up and said, "I'm Michael Weber. I need to call my wife." Medical examination revealed severe vitamin D deficiency, suggesting years without sunlight. His body showed evidence of prolonged malnutrition. There were old fractures that had healed incorrectly, marks around his ankles consistent with long-term restraint. When questioned about where he had been for 6 years, Michael repeatedly said the same phrase, "The collector keeps what belongs in his gallery." But who was the collector, and what happened to Michael Weber during those 6 missing years, you will find out in this video. Michael Weber was an environmental scientist from Eugene, Oregon. On July 15, 2016, he embarked on a solo hike to photograph old-growth redwoods for a research project. The last confirmed sighting was at 8:17 a.m., when he signed the trail register at the Tall Trees trailhead. Security footage from the visitor center showed him purchasing a park map at 7:45 a.m. He was wearing khaki hiking pants, a blue moisture-wicking shirt, and sturdy brown hiking boots. He carried a green backpack with black straps. According to the hiking plan he filed, Weber intended to follow the Tall Trees loop, then connect to the Redwood Creek Trail, camping for 2 nights before returning to his vehicle on July 17th. The weather that day was overcast with light rain in the morning, clearing by midday. Temperature was 58 degrees Fahrenheit. At 9:02 a.m., Weber texted his wife, Sarah, "Starting the hike now. Signal might get spotty. Love you." This was the last communication anyone received from him. Cell tower data confirmed the message originated from the trailhead area. His phone never connected to any network after that point. At 5:30 p.m. on July 17th, Sarah Weber called park rangers to report that her husband had not returned as scheduled and wasn't answering his phone. Rangers located Weber's Honda Civic, still parked at the trailhead. They initiated a standard welfare check, walking the trail he had planned to take, La Cromo Mcampwi Wawausigya, calling his name. At 7:45 p.m., with darkness falling and no sign of Weber, they suspended the search until morning. At 6 a.m. on July the 18th, a formal search operation began. 3 teams of rangers and local search and rescue volunteers started at different points along Weber's planned route. A dog team was brought in at 8:30 a.m. The search dogs picked up Weber's scent from items in his car and followed it along the trail for approximately 1.7 miles. The dogs lost the scent at a fork in the trail where the Tall Trees Loop connects to a less traveled path that veers east toward Redwood Creek. By midday, a helicopter was deployed for aerial observation. The dense canopy of the redwoods limited visibility from above. Ground teams expanded the search to cover a 3-mile radius from the point where the dogs lost the scent. At 4:15 p.m., a search team found Weber's backpack approximately 200 yards from the trail. The backpack was partially covered with forest debris. The contents included a water bladder still half full, trail mix and energy bars unopened, a first aid kit, and a rain jacket. Weber's camera was missing. The position of the backpack didn't make sense, said search team leader Frank Matheson in his report. It wasn't dropped in a hurry or abandoned in a fall. It looked placed, almost hidden deliberately. On July 19th, searchers found a single brown hiking boot matching the description of Weber's footwear. The boot was approximately 400 yards from where the backpack was discovered, in the opposite direction from the trail. The bootlaces had been removed. No blood or signs of struggle were evident in the area. The search continued for 2 weeks, eventually involving over 70 personnel from multiple agencies, including the National Park Service, local sheriff's departments, and volunteer search and rescue teams. Thermal imaging equipment was brought in but yielded no results. The search was hampered by the dense forest, ravines, fallen trees, and the vast area that needed to be covered. On August 5, 2016, with no further evidence found and resources stretched thin, the official search was scaled back. Sarah Weber hired private search teams that continued for another month, but no trace of Michael was found. The case remained open but inactive, classified as a missing person in wilderness area, presumed deceased. "The forest just swallowed him," Sarah Weber told the local newspaper in a 2017 interview. "It's like he vanished into thin air." For 6 years, Michael Weber remained a missing person case. His wife never declared him legally dead, holding on to hope that somehow he had survived. Then, on November 23, 2022, at approximately 3:15 p.m., park maintenance worker Diego Ramirez was finishing his shift at the Tall Trees parking area. "I was locking up the maintenance shed when I noticed him," Ramirez stated in his report. "He was just sitting there on the curb staring at the trailhead sign. At first I thought he was a homeless person who had wandered into the park. He was incredibly thin. His clothes were too big for him, like they belonged to someone else. His hair was long and matted. His beard reached the middle of his chest. And his skin. I've never seen anyone so pale, like he'd never seen the sun." When Ramirez approached and asked if the man needed help, the response was unexpected. "I'm Michael Weber. I need to call my wife." His voice was raspy, as if unused to speaking. Ramirez, familiar with the Weber case from Park Service briefings, immediately called park rangers. Rangers arrived within 30 minutes and found the man still sitting in the same spot, refusing to move from the parking lot. He appeared disoriented but calm. He could state his name and his wife's contact information, but would not or could not explain where he had been for 6 years. When asked direct questions about his disappearance, he would only repeat, "The collector keeps what belongs in his gallery." The man was transported to Redwood Memorial Hospital in Fortuna, California. Medical staff noted his extreme emaciation. He weighed 97 pounds, down from his pre-disappearance weight of 175. His body temperature was below normal at 96.1 degrees Fahrenheit. Blood work showed severe vitamin D deficiency, anemia, and electrolyte imbalances consistent with long-term malnutrition. Physical examination revealed several concerning findings. Old fractures in his right arm and 3 ribs had healed improperly without medical intervention. There were symmetrical scars around both ankles, consistent with prolonged restraint by some form of shackles. Similar marks were found on his wrists. Most of his teeth showed decay. His feet had numerous scars and calluses, suggesting he had gone without shoes for extended periods. Psychologically, Weber was withdrawn but cooperative. He responded to simple questions about his immediate needs, but became unresponsive when asked about the years he was missing. The hospital psychiatrist noted that Weber exhibited symptoms consistent with severe trauma and possible captivity: hypervigilance, startle response to loud noises, refusal to enter small rooms or allow doors to be closed, and apparent flashbacks triggered by certain sounds or movements. The one thing Weber would say about his ordeal was the phrase about the collector and his gallery. When pressed for details, he would either repeat the phrase or fall silent. He also exhibited unusual behavior, checking corners of rooms, examining walls as if looking for something, and refusing to sleep unless the room was brightly lit. After being stabilized medically, Weber was reunited with his wife, Sarah, who confirmed his identity. According to staff present, the reunion was emotional but unusual. Weber embraced his wife but kept looking over his shoulder. He asked her repeatedly if she had been watched while he was gone. 2 days after his return, with his medical condition improving, Weber gave his first account of what had happened to him. He claimed he had been hiking on the trail when he became disoriented in the forest. He said he wandered for days, became injured in a fall, and was found by a hermit living in the woods. According to this initial story, the hermit, whom Weber called the collector, kept him in a cabin, sometimes treating him well, sometimes poorly, but preventing him from leaving. Weber claimed he eventually escaped when the hermit became ill and died. "I buried him in the woods," Weber stated. "I couldn't find my way back for a long time. I've been trying to reach the parking lot for months." This account raised immediate red flags with investigators. The timeline didn't make sense. Weber's vitamin D deficiency suggested years without sunlight, inconsistent with living in a cabin in the woods. His physical condition indicated confinement and malnutrition, far beyond what his story suggested. And the symmetrical restraint marks on his ankles and wrists contradicted the idea of being a semi-willing guest of a forest hermit. Detective Lena Torres of the Humboldt County Sheriff's Office was assigned to the case. With 20 years of experience in missing persons and violent crimes, Torres approached Weber's return with methodical skepticism. When someone reappears after years missing and the physical evidence doesn't match their story, we have to consider all possibilities, Torres noted in her case file, including that the subject may be protecting someone, may have been involved in their own disappearance, or may be suffering from psychological issues affecting their memory or willingness to disclose. Torres began by treating Weber as both a victim and a potential suspect. Had he staged his own disappearance? Was he involved in something criminal during those 6 years? Why would he protect someone who had apparently held him captive? Forensic analysis of Weber's clothing provided the first contradictions to his story. The clothes he was wearing when found were not his own. They were at least 2 sizes too large and of a brand Weber had never purchased, according to his wife. Soil samples from the clothing did not match the forest floor of Redwood National Park but contained mineral traces consistent with a subterranean environment. Medical evidence further eroded Weber's hermit cabin story. Dr. Eleanor Chen, the physician who treated Weber, stated in her report, "The pattern of vitamin D deficiency and muscle atrophy suggests years without sunlight or significant movement. This is inconsistent with living in a forest cabin. Even as a captive, the patient would have needed to be kept entirely indoors, likely underground or in a windowless facility for an extended period." The restraint marks told another story. Forensic analysis indicated they were made by metal restraints uniformly applied, rather than improvised bindings a hermit might use. The pattern suggested professional restraint equipment. Additionally, trace material found embedded in the scar tissue contained an unusual alloy of steel with chromium and nickel, industrial-grade metal not typically found in homemade restraints. Most damning to Weber's story was the timeline of a hermit's death and his escape. If Weber had buried the hermit as he claimed, the body would be in an identifiable location, and the burial would have left evidence on Weber's hands and clothing. No soil samples consistent with grave digging were found under his fingernails or on his clothes. 2 weeks after Weber's return, with medical treatment improving his physical condition, Detective Torres confronted him with these inconsistencies. Weber maintained his hermit cabin story, but grew increasingly agitated as Torres methodically dismantled each element with evidence. "The subject became visibly distressed," Torres wrote. "His hands trembled, and he repeatedly looked toward the hospital room door, as if expecting someone to enter." The breakthrough came on December 12, 2022. A nurse entered Weber's room at 2:15 a.m. for a routine check and found him hiding in the bathroom, clutching a small folded paper that had been concealed in the seam of his hospital gown. When the nurse asked what he was doing, Weber reportedly whispered, "He knows I'm here. He said he would find me if I talked." The paper contained a handwritten message. "Gallery subjects who speak become part of the permanent collection. Your wife sleeps in the blue house with white trim. 1422 Cedar Street. The upstairs window is never locked." This note, which accurately described Sarah Weber's home, was the first concrete evidence that Weber was being threatened into silence. Forensic analysis of the paper showed it was hospital stationery, but the handwriting did not match Weber's. More concerning was the implication that whoever had held Weber captive had been able to enter the hospital and leave this note, suggesting both surveillance and continued threat. With this evidence, Torres arranged for Sarah Weber to be placed in protective custody and for Michael Weber to be moved to a secure facility outside the county. With the immediate threat to his family addressed, Weber finally began to reveal what had really happened to him. According to the transcript of his statement, Weber had been hiking on the trail when he was struck from behind and lost consciousness. He awoke in complete darkness, shackled to a wall in what felt like a cave or tunnel. His captor, who never provided a name but referred to himself as the Collector, told Weber he was now part of a living gallery of specimens. "He said the forest provides him with subjects," Weber stated. "He told me I was fortunate to be selected for the permanent collection." Weber described his captivity in fragmented, sometimes contradictory details. He was kept in a series of underground chambers that had been excavated beneath the forest. The main gallery contained 6 cells built into the rock walls. During his captivity, Weber saw 4 other people held in these cells. He did not know their names. The Collector referred to them only by numbers. Weber was Specimen 5. "Sometimes there would be a new person," Weber said, "and sometimes someone would disappear." He called it deaccessioning when specimens failed to thrive. The restraint marks on Weber's ankles and wrists corresponded with his description of being shackled to the wall of his cell, with limited mobility allowed. The Collector would sometimes release him for what he called exercise periods in a larger central chamber, but always under supervision and threat. Weber could not provide a coherent timeline of his captivity. Without daylight or regular patterns, he lost track of time. He believed he had been in the underground gallery for many years, but could not say exactly how many. The Collector would bring food at irregular intervals, sometimes generous meals, sometimes nothing for days. Weber described being forced to perform for his captor, demonstrating his physical and mental endurance through tests and tasks. "He would make me recite things, poems, scientific facts about the redwoods, personal memories. If I performed well, I would get food or water. If I didn't, he would leave me in darkness for, I don't know how long, days maybe." The most disturbing aspect of Weber's captivity was the Collector's documentation process. Weber described being photographed regularly, his physical deterioration recorded in what the Collector called the progression of specimen adaptation to gallery conditions. These photographs were displayed on the walls of the central chamber, showing the transformation of each captive over time. With Weber's testimony providing specific details, investigators began a search for the underground facility. The search focused on the area where Weber had disappeared, concentrating on terrain that could potentially conceal an underground structure. Ground-penetrating radar was brought in to identify anomalies beneath the forest floor. On December 27, 2022, search teams located an entrance concealed behind a rock formation approximately 1.2 miles from where Weber's backpack had been found. The entrance was disguised to look like a natural crevice, but opened into a tunnel, reinforced with timber supports. The tunnel led to a series of chambers excavated into the hillside. The scene investigators discovered matched Weber's description with disturbing accuracy. 6 cells were built into the rock walls of a central chamber, each with metal shackles anchored to the stone. The central space contained photographic equipment, a generator, and walls covered with framed photographs of captives in various stages of deterioration. Each photograph was meticulously labeled with a date and a specimen number. The gallery was like a museum exhibit of human suffering, stated FBI agent Marcus Delgado, who led the evidence collection team. Each cell was a display case. The documentation was methodical, scientific almost. Forensic teams recovered hair, blood, and tissue samples from 5 of the 6 cells. DNA analysis would later confirm that at least 7 different individuals had been held in the facility over an unknown period. 2 of the DNA profiles matched known missing persons cases from Redwood National Park: Eliza Santora, age 28, who disappeared in 2012, and James Kilpatrick, age 34, who went missing in 2018. Neither has been found. As investigators processed the underground facility, another discovery raised alarming questions. A separate chamber, accessible through a hidden door in the main gallery, contained living quarters with considerably more comfort: a bed, food supplies, books, and a detailed journal. The journal, written in meticulous handwriting, documented the collector's philosophy and methods. The subjects must be separated from their natural environment to reveal their true essence, one entry read. Like specimens in formaldehyde, they are preserved in a state of suspended existence, neither fully alive nor dead. This is the only way to observe human nature in its purest form. The journal entries spanned over 15 years, suggesting the operation had been running since at least 2007. More concerning was evidence that the collector had not acted alone. References to apprentices and gallery assistants appeared in later entries, indicating others had been involved in maintaining the facility and possibly selecting new victims. The journal also revealed how Weber had escaped. An entry dated November 17, 2022 noted, "Specimen 5 found the maintenance key during feeding. Absence discovered at 0400. Search protocols initiated." This aligned with Weber's eventual admission that he had stolen a key from the collector during a moment of inattention, released himself from his shackles, and fled through maintenance tunnels that led to the surface. Despite the wealth of evidence recovered from the underground gallery, the collector himself remained elusive. No fingerprints, DNA, or identifiable evidence pointed to a specific individual. The journal never mentioned a name, and Weber insisted he had never seen the collector's face clearly, as he always wore a mask or head covering during interactions with his specimens. The investigation expanded to examine patterns of disappearances in the park and surrounding areas over the past 15 years. Records showed 23 unsolved missing persons cases within a 50-mile radius of the gallery location. Of these, 9 had disappeared from hiking trails in Redwood National Park. The pattern suggested the collector had been selecting victims from park visitors for years, with authorities attributing the disappearances to wilderness accidents, animal attacks, or people choosing to disappear. The search for the collector intensified as evidence mounted that he was still active. The note delivered to Weber in the Saums hospital proved he had been under surveillance after his escape. Security footage from the hospital showed no unauthorized visitors, suggesting the collector had connections that allowed him access or the ability to blend in with authorized personnel. On January 15, 2023, Park Ranger Thomas Kruger noticed unusual activity near a maintenance shed in a remote area of the park. When he approached to investigate, he was attacked by an unidentified male, described as approximately 60 years old, tall, with a beard. Kruger was struck on the head but managed to fire his service weapon during the struggle. The assailant fled into the forest, leaving a blood trail that dogs followed for half a mile before losing the scent at Redwood Creek. DNA from the blood match samples found in the living quarters of the underground gallery confirming the attacker was likely the collector. A park-wide manhunt ensued, involving federal agents, local law enforcement, and Park Service personnel. Despite the extensive search, no further trace of the collector was found. The blood trail suggested he had been wounded, possibly severely, but no body was recovered. As the investigation continued, Weber's health improved, though psychological healing proved more challenging. He suffered from nightmares, panic attacks, and episodes of dissociation. He would sometimes lapse into behaviors learned during captivity, standing motionless for hours, reciting information unprompted, or checking walls for cameras. Dr. Rachel Kleinman, the psychologist treating Weber, noted in her assessment, "The subject exhibits complex trauma responses consistent with prolonged captivity and psychological conditioning. His sense of agency and autonomy were systematically dismantled over years. Recovery will require extensive treatment and may never be complete." Weber's testimony became more detailed as his psychological state stabilized. He described how the collector would sometimes bring visitors to view the gallery during his years of captivity. These individuals would observe the captives through viewing ports in the cell doors, taking notes and discussing them as if they were museum exhibits. They wore masks, Weber stated. All of them. They would point and take notes. Sometimes they would request a demonstration. The collector would make us perform tasks while they watched. This testimony suggested a network of individuals involved in or aware of the collector's activities, possibly the apprentices mentioned in the journal. Investigators began examining visitors to the park during the time frames Weber recalled these viewings occurring, looking for patterns or recurring visitors. On February 8, 2023, a significant break in the case occurred. A wildlife photographer reviewing footage captured by a remote camera he had set up to observe mountain lions discovered images of a man matching the collector's description. The man was walking with difficulty through a remote area of the park, approximately 7 miles from the gallery site. He appeared to be injured, moving with a pronounced limp, and carrying a backpack. The timestamp indicated the images were captured on January 16th, the day after the attack on Ranger Kruger. Search teams converged on the area where the photographs were taken. After 2 days of searching, they discovered a small cabin hidden in a grove of redwoods. The cabin was unoccupied, but showed signs of recent use. Bloodstains on the floor and bandaging materials suggested someone had treated a wound there. Food supplies and equipment indicated the cabin had been stocked as a fallback position. Most importantly, investigators found documentation, maps of Redwood National Park with locations marked, including the gallery site and several other potential excavation areas. They also found a list of names, including Michael Weber and the other identified victims. The list contained 27 names in total, far more than the confirmed victims found in the gallery. Forensic analysis of items in the cabin provided the first solid identification of the collector. Fingerprints on a journal matched those of Dr. Arthur Prescott, 67, a former geology professor at Humboldt State University, who had been reported missing in 2007. Prescott had been presumed dead after his vehicle was found abandoned near a known suicide location on the coast. His body had never been recovered. Prescott's background revealed disturbing parallels to the collector's methods. As a geologist, he specialized in cave formations and underground structures. He had published papers on human adaptation to subterranean environments. Former colleagues described him as brilliant, but increasingly erratic in the years before his disappearance, obsessed with what he called human specimen preservation studies. The evidence suggested Prescott had staged his own death in 2007 to begin his new identity as the collector. The timing matched the earliest journal entries found in the underground gallery. His geological expertise explained his ability to locate and excavate the complex underground facility without detection. With Prescott identified as the collector, The manhunt narrowed its focus. His injury from the encounter with Ranger Kruger would limit his mobility and require medical attention. Alerts went out to all medical facilities within a 100-mile radius to watch for patients with gunshot wounds. Border patrols and transportation hubs were notified to watch for someone matching his description. On February 23, 2023, a physician in Crescent City, California, reported treating a man with a gunshot wound to the leg who had given a false name and paid in cash. The man had claimed the injury was from a hunting accident. By the time authorities arrived at the motel where the patient was staying, he had fled, leaving behind bloodied bandages and antibiotics. The trail went cold after this sighting. Despite continued searches, Arthur Prescott, now known to be the collector, disappeared. The investigation remained active, but with each passing week, the likelihood of finding him diminished. For Michael Weber, the identification of his captor brought limited closure. In his final recorded interview with investigators, Weber expressed his ongoing fear. He's still out there. He'll find new specimens. He'll start another gallery. That's what the journal said. This was Gallery 3. There were others before. The Weber case resulted in the review of all missing persons cases in national parks throughout the Pacific Northwest. 2 additional underground facilities similar to the gallery were discovered, one in Olympic National Park in Washington State and another in Crater Lake National Park in Oregon. Both had been abandoned years earlier, but evidence collected matched Prescott's methods and contained DNA from other missing persons. Arthur Prescott remains at large. The FBI maintains an open case file, and his name appears on their most wanted list. The journal recovered from the underground gallery continues to yield disturbing insights into his methodology and philosophy. Entries suggest he viewed himself as a scientist conducting legitimate research on human adaptation to extreme conditions. He referred to his captives as contributors to scientific understanding, rather than victims. As for Michael Weber, he and his wife relocated to an undisclosed location outside California. According to Dr. Kleinman's final assessment, Weber continues to struggle with the psychological effects of his captivity. He refuses to sleep in dark rooms. He checks corners and walls for cameras. He stands motionless when stressed, reverting to behaviors learned during his captivity. The medical report notes that Weber still repeats the phrase about the collector and his gallery during episodes of distress. His last recorded statement to investigators made in April 2023, "He's watching, he's always watching. The gallery never really closes." To this day, hikers in Redwood National Park are advised never to venture off established trails. Rangers conduct regular sweeps of remote areas, searching for signs of unauthorized excavation or construction. Additional security cameras have been installed at trailheads and parking areas. The underground gallery has been sealed, its entrance collapsed and concealed. The photographs, journals, and documentation recovered are stored in FBI evidence facilities, studied for insights that might help locate other victims or prevent future abductions. The Weber case remains one of the most disturbing examples of predatory behavior in national parks. While most missing persons in wilderness areas are lost to accidents or environmental hazards, Michael Weber's experience reveals a darker possibility that sometimes the forest conceals not just natural dangers, but human predators who see visitors not as fellow humans, but as specimens for collection. Arthur Prescott's journal contained one final entry, dated November 22, 2022, the day before Weber was found at the trailhead. Specimen 5 has demonstrated unexpected adaptability. His escape is not an endpoint, but a continuation of the experiment in a new phase. The true test begins now. Can a specimen successfully reintegrate after gallery conditioning? I will continue to observe from a distance. The study remains ongoing. The case file notes that Michael Weber refused to return to any forested area after his rescue. When asked during his final interview what he thought happened to the other captives whose cells were empty when he escaped, Weber simply said, "The collector doesn't discard specimens. He archives them."